going on YouTube? This is Jim, back with another video, and today I want to give you guys my review of Devil May Cry 5. But before I get into that, I want to tell you to please consider commenting, rating, and subscribing, but if not, that's okay too. I typically don't do reviews on my channel. I get very low view counts with them, and I found that I get more views doing other things that I like, talking about unboxings and gaming controversies and such. So I typically tend to stay to those, but when I played this game, man oh man, I realized I had to talk about it because it's one of the best games I've played this year. It will absolutely be on my 2019 best of the best year in review that I do with Brent. Hopefully before 2019 is over. I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. But really more importantly, Devil May Cry 5 has that kind of unforeseen, really unpublished tagline, Capcom is back. I've heard a lot of people say, Capcom is back. Well, I'm still not entirely sure what that means, but I can say that Devil May Cry is definitely back, and this game really is hitting every single note for me. Now, I think back to old school games like the original Dead Rising, or the original Devil May Cry. And those games were so different than everything else around them at the time, and I think that's why we have such fond memories of them. Devil May Cry, obviously using a gun to juggle enemies in the air while using a sword, getting ranked on how you kill people, getting style points, very intuitive. Then you had the Dead Rising series, which used everything as weapons, really over-the-top writing, very bonkers, very goofy world where you'd harvest enemy guts and build these weird contraptions like electric shopping carts or chainsaw sledgehammers and kill things rapidly. And I feel like whoever was the creative mind behind those games definitely had a hand in Devil May Cry 5 because the action is way over the top. The dialogue, the writing just has these cool, somewhat cheesy moments in there constantly. The music in the background just slamming you in the face with just this, it really makes you grit your teeth. And if you guys remember when I talked about Doom years ago, and I said Doom is one of those games that you just want to stand up, you want to rip your shirt off, and you want to just scream because it just fills you with adrenaline. To me, Devil May Cry 5 did that on the console. I know it's available on computer as well, but man, oh man, does this look good on the Xbox One X. I've heard people say this is one of the gold standards in graphics, and I have to agree. This game is absolutely gorgeous. The gibs and the guts that blow off from enemies, the sparks that shoot, the lighting effects, the shadow effects, everything has just been meticulously detailed. Now, it makes sense because it's not an open world game per se. You're definitely going through a lot of corridors, so Capcom had a lot of say in kind of what you would see, which I think ups the fidelity greatly because you don't have to worry about things like long draw distances or enemies spawning farther away if you took a corner or driving a car or something like that. When you remove that open world element, you definitely get the liberty of raising up that fidelity, and they have done that in this game, and it is gorgeous. It's so pretty. Eye candy alone, the gameplay is some of the most refined fighting gameplay I've ever played. Now, I know a lot of naysayers have said the controls are difficult, but I maintain that it's as hard as you want it to be. And if you want that challenge and you want to really go above and beyond with a ridiculous move set, you can. If you want to just spam auto attack, you know, your basic sword swing or your basic gun attack, you're going to be able to do that and succeed pretty much as well too. Now, you're not going to get all the cool rankings. You probably won't get all the upgrades, but if you're playing that way, you probably don't care. I'm not going to ruin anything on the story. Suffice to say that it is a direct sequel to Devil May Cry 4. So the DMC game, which I actually did like, isn't part of this universe. But they do a really good job of explaining to you what you need to know to get into this game. And even if you don't even want to look at that, you'll pretty much be able to figure out what's going on because the dialogue is written in such a way that kind of reintroduces all the characters and kind of explains who they are in a non-cheesy way. A lot of those games do that where they're like, oh, hello, Luigi, brother of Mario. Have you saved the princess this week? And you get this really ham-fisted exposition of characters. You don't have that in this game, but it's pretty clear who's aligning with who and kind of their backstory just by the dialogue. And I have to credit the game for that, because this universe is goofy. It's kind of meant to be goofy. It's a demon-infested world in which heroes rise up to fight demons as a company called Devil May Cry, which is bizarre in of itself, but it works in this universe. And what I love about the game is, with combination of the story and the gameplay, is that it slowly builds you up to this grand finale that has a really good payoff. And that's both in terms of gameplay and in story. And I find that a lot of games struggle with this. I won't critique any specific games in this review, but there are a lot of games that just don't know when to quit. There are a lot of games that suffer from open world-itis. This game has a story to tell you, and in about, I don't know, 15 or so hours, depending on how you play, you will get the story and you're done. There's not a lot more that needs to be said at this point in terms of where the story is. Obviously, it leaves room for future stories to be told, but every character has a good enough story arc where they go through things. There's a good plot behind everything that drives the action forward, and at the end, it's a very satisfying experience, and I love that. You play as 3 different characters. You start off as Nero. Now, Nero was the hero in Devil May Cry 4. Unfortunately, he's lost his demon arm, and it's been replaced by this robotic arm that has disposable charges. And it is an incredible blast to play with him, because he's a good combination of Dante, which is over the top, and a much more linear fighter. Nero can pull off some ridiculous combinations with his sword and with his gun. He will upgrade all of those abilities throughout the game, and by the end, Nero in and of himself will be an absolute badass. Then you transition over to the exact opposite. You transition over to this mysterious character known as V. V's powers are in summoning a like kind of a shadow wolf and a hawk that kind of fly around, and he never directly attacks. You basically command these animals to attack for you. You could build up your meter and summon this thing called a nightmare, which is phenomenally awesome. It's this giant gargantuan who crashes in through walls like the Kool-Aid Man, or drops in from the skies like a meteor, bubbles up from sewer grates. And he is a very, very tough person to fight. Force to be reckoned with, absolutely. The nice thing about V is that you kind of play more an artillery role. So as we're Nero, you're kind of in the middle of the action. You're kind of pulling back and forth with the action. V is absolutely an artillery character, and the contrast between their 2 game styles is phenomenal. And they don't really overdo it with either of those 2 characters in terms of missions. They'll do a couple Nero missions, they'll do a couple V missions, and then finally, about halfway through the game, you're reunited with the main man himself, Dante. Dante plays unlike either of those 2 characters, with a slew of weapons to choose from, whether it be a Michael Jackson kind of hat where he dances around, kind of like Michael Jackson does, grabbing his crotch and throwing his hat and moonwalking, which, again, bizarre, right? But fun, to a motorcycle that can be cleaved apart and can be used as 2 individual chainsaw-type weapons. Of course, he's got his old-school swords. He's got ebony and ivory. He's got the Coyote A shotgun. He's got a rocket launcher. He's got a slew of weapons to choose from. His control moves and his control scheme, rather, is extremely complex compared to Nero or V, but he can pull off the most ridiculous combos at any time, juggling multiple enemies in the air. He has 4 different fight styles that each can be upgraded, the different weapons that can be switched on the fly, the different guns that can be switched on the fly. He is a true force to be reckoned with. And I like the way they paced him, where it kind of gives you a taste of that artillery style in V and that medium close range up with Nero, to then jump over to Dante, who is the absolute master, the jack of all trades, the bona fide badass, the dude on the cover, the guy who is really embodiment of the Devil May Cry series. And when you start playing with him and you get good, wow, you're going to do incredible things. And this game has a slew of replayability in terms of the secret missions to find all the hidden collectibles, in terms of challenging your friends and trying to get a better score than them, in terms of just playing for fun, because it's so much fun to juggle multiple enemies in the air, morph into this motorcycle, drive around, hit people, jump off, flaming boxing gloves, finish it up with a rocket launcher, all while looking stylish and sexy. It is an absolute blast. I highly recommend this game. If I had to give any flaws to the game, there's a couple small things that I think keeps it from being absolutely perfect. The first being that when you play as Nero, unfortunately, since his arms are fragile, they tend to break. And it kind of limits your experimentation because you're going to want to start to play with them more than you can. And you're going to have to go through parts of the area where you're not going to have an arm at all. You're basically going to have just a nub, which means you haven't found any arms to suit up and equip with, to fight with. And that's kind of unfortunate because in a game that's really all about experimentation and those really fun moments playing with Dante, trying to juggle in multiple weapons at once that never break, that never damage, having Nero be more fragile. I understand why they did it from a tonal standpoint. I mean, you can't have Nero be as powerful as Dante. It just doesn't work that way. But at the same time, I feel like they went a little too far on, it's almost like a different game in of itself. And I didn't enjoy that because I wanted to experiment more with him. And I constantly had to either reload missions or pick and buy a specific loadout just to try for a few seconds to see if I liked the way it worked. You can't switch hands on the fly until you basically detonate it and it explodes and you lose it. So you're not going to be able to juggle in enemies the way you could with Dante, and I thought that was a major turnoff. The other thing that I'm not a fan of is DMC5 added this kind of social system. There's a lot of instances in the game where you will be playing with other people, but not in the same area. There are a few instances where you will actually team up in this kind of co-op area, but for the most part, since this plot jumps around a lot in time, you'll see two characters maybe taking two similar paths side by side. And if you're playing with one character, you can look over on the horizon and see the other character. And that character is either controlled by AI or most likely another player either live at that time or a recording of their gameplay. And the problem with that is you constantly have to see their handle off on the left-hand side, and it's not like you can interact with them in any capacity. I feel like this is maybe Devil May Cry's dabble into see if multiplayer works. And in the few areas where everybody teams up together and you are destroying enemies and just through osmosis really chaining together ridiculous combinations where enemies are being thrown up in the air and shot with a slew of weapons, multiplayer would absolutely work in a Devil May Cry game. And I feel like this is maybe their teaser into it to see if it worked out. But the social media element, or this, you're going to play sort of with your friends, sort of with random people, it doesn't really work out, and it does create some weird glitches that occur in the game, some weird networking hitches, definitely some weird crashes that I've experienced and I've seen on message boards that other people have experienced too. But I'm sure that stuff will be fixed in time, and it definitely does not ruin anything else I told you. It's just those are some criticisms I want you guys to be aware of, mostly for completeness. And with that, I want to wrap up this video and give this game a final score. Devil May Cry 5 is an absolute blast. If I had to rank it on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the best, this game ranks 9.8. It doesn't get a perfect score for the aforementioned problems I just mentioned, but everything else about this game is beautiful. The microtransaction system doesn't even need to be in the game. I didn't really talk about it because it's a non-issue. You're going to earn tons of orbs on your own. You're going to be able to upgrade your character to your heart's content. They've already announced some DLC that's going to be coming in the way of this Bloody Palace Challenge Pack. They've also announced other DLC will be coming in the future. And I can't wait to see where this adventure takes us next. The name of the game is Devil May Cry 5. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.